really am a fan. I like Jarred Kelenic. He is a person and a personality that I gravitate towards quite a bit. That people were remembering the bad times last night or last year and not thinking about the positive that came on the second, the second side of that, when he was called back up, when he got it figured out, and when honestly he was one of the leaders on this team in September, where his at bats were must watch. Like, oh, Kelnic's up, get to the TV. Let's see what this guy's going to do. So I don't know, maybe a little surprised, maybe a little miffed that it felt like people were only thinking about the negatives from last year and really going to, I felt like, some dark places with Jarred Kelenic. His personality's not going to work. He's too intense. He's got to relax. He knows he's got to relax. But I think that got turned, like some of his openness and honesty about that, it feels like to me anyway, had been getting turned into making more out of it than it really is. Like, yeah, he's being open and honest and saying he's got to chill. I don't think he's like, Mr. T or something, like gritting his teeth and I don't know that it's that. I think he just needs to try to, relax, and that's an important part of it. And so, I heard Joe fans say this yesterday, and I've been thinking about it since.
It looks like one guy's having a lot of fun playing baseball, and one guy is so stressed about failing that he's, making himself sick and is miserable. And that's just sort of the vibe I get from him.
I love Joe, and I disagree. Just flat out. And I didn't want to fight with him yesterday because, honestly, I had just been fighting with Brock 5 minutes earlier, and I didn't want to subject you guys to like a half hour of me fighting and arguing with everybody. But I really disagree with that take a lot. And I apologize to Joe for kind of doing this a day later, especially after Kelenic had a good night. It's not fair to Joe, who is 100% entitled to that opinion, and he's not the only one who's got it. But I really disagree with it. I don't know that is exactly who Kelenic is. I don't think he's a guy who doesn't have fun. Quite frankly, I think he's the opposite of that. I think he is fun. He just kind of does it in his own weird, kind of intense way.
First one, I was looking for something soft. I didn't think that his fastball was going to beat me. Wanted to stay through the left side of the field with it, and was just going to take the approach of a fastball that I was just going to react to it, especially if it was in. And that's kind of just what happened. I believe I took a first pitch curveball. That I thought was a ball, and then the next pitch was just a fastball that I reacted, and I got the head out and smell you later.
Right? Like, that's not a guy who's worried about failure. That's a guy who's a student of the game, who understands exactly what's going on around him, and has a little bit of edge to him, has a little bit of cockiness to him. That's different, I think, from being afraid to fail. And I'm not saying that the two things can't go together. And I'm not saying that Jarred doesn't also have...
Yeah, because we are constantly hearing him talk about how he needs to get out of his own head.
I totally agree. But because he's being honest about that, I think we're exaggerating it. I think that's true of a lot of players. A lot more players, probably more than half of them, need to get out of their own head and need to stop thinking so much. Baseball's a really hard game. I think Jarred's quote-unquote mistake is that he's being really honest about it, and it's forcing people into this view of like, well, he's not like Julio, so it must be bad.
Right.
It's not bad. In fact, let me go one step further. If and when Kelenic puts it together, which I believe he will do, that confidence, that kind of cockiness that he's got, that intensity will be incredibly valuable for this team. If you go back and try to think about the way it was being talked about before he got sent down last year, before some of the struggles, the confidence was supposed to be one of the best things about him.
I would have said that would have been the case that, years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. But maybe not now. I remember Alex Bregman of the Houston Astros was that way.
Yeah.
And they say with Kelenic, it's like, okay, if there's a triple hitter today, he wants to play all 3 games because he can get 12 hits. He doesn't want to be a perennial All-Star. He wants to be a Hall of Famer. So it's good for a guy to have that kind of confidence in him. I think Kobe Bryant, when he came up, had that kind of confidence.
That's Bob Nightingale talking last year before Kelenic came up. Right? That was the rap on Kelenic before he got here. He's so confident. He believes so strongly in himself. And if he had only had the 0 for 39 and not had his September last year, I think I would be willing to accept, maybe he was just broken. But he wasn't. He had his confidence, questioned. He went down to AAA. He told us he questioned some things about his life. And then he got it back together. So this idea that he's out there afraid to fail, I'm sorry, I just don't believe it at all. This is a guy with high expectations and, I think, a personality that is going to be incredibly important for a few reasons. Yes, you get that comp to Alex Bregman. I'll throw two others out there. One is Josh Donaldson, another guy who plays the game with some edge and some nastiness, and he might not be the most likable guy around, but he brings a little something extra to his team, because if he's working that hard and he's doing that, you better as well. And the other guy is Dustin Pedroia, who also brought some of that, I think generally with a smile. Well, not quite a smile, more of a smirk. But Pedroia kind of brought a lot of that edge and some of that, intensity that I think Kelenic has. I've relayed this story I don't know how many times, but I'll do it one more because I really see a lot of Pedroia in Kelenic, which is, Dustin's, his rookie year, second year, whatever year it was. I remember sitting there with him at the, I don't know, maybe it was June before a game, real early. It's like 4 o'clock. He's just hanging out. And I was asking him about Kevin Youkilis, who was having a great year that year, right? I was covering the Red Sox at the time. And I'm like, hey, you think you could win the MVP? Do you think that's actually in the cards for him? And he's like, no. And I was like, oh, he's like, I'm going to win the MVP. Why are you talking about me?
I mean, you're serious.
Dead serious. 100% dead serious. And serious but with a smirk. Do you know what I mean? Everything Dustin Pedroia says is serious, but also maybe he's joking. Do you know what I mean? Do you know people like that where you're never entirely sure? And I've always kind of wondered if Kelenic's got some of that in him also, where he's got the same ability to do what Pedroia did that year when, by the way, he did win the MVP. He was absolutely right. He ended up winning it. And perhaps you've heard the story because it's gone public of what he said after Game 2 of the World Series that year. They went back to Colorado for Games 3 and 4, and as he was walking in the door, he didn't have his badge on him, and a security person tried to stop him. As he walked past them, who are you? Hey, man. He turns around and just over his shoulder casually yells, hey, why don't you ask Jeff Francis who I am? Jeff Francis being the pitcher he'd homered off of the night before. That's his attitude, and he brought some of that swagger to that team. So, yes, having Julio around and the big smile and the easygoing, happy-go-lucky, big puppy dog thing is great. And a lot of people will gravitate towards Julio, and it's an important, awesome part, and this is not a negative at all. I think it is really helpful to balance that with some of the edge, nastiness, grit, determination, confidence, cockiness that you get from Jarred Kelenic. And personally, as much as I love Julio and his at-bats are must-watch for me, this may not surprise you, but I'm more drawn to the Kelenic personality. I'm more drawn to some of the cockiness, some of the edge, some of the nastiness, and I can't wait for that moment he goes in spikes high somewhere and starts something and says, whatever, man, I'm Jarred Kelenic, and I'm here to start you-know-what. Let's go. I'm pumped for that, man. I think it will be great for the personality of this Seattle Mariners.